What's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. I'm Ben. If you're new here this season, I will be building out two of the most iconic big bore dual sport dinosaurs to bridge the gap from everything from single track to freeway travel. Obviously, the XR650 here has a bit of a jump on the old DR, but today we're going to be jumping in and swapping the bars on the DR650. And I think the majority of people would not consider handlebars a performance part on a motorcycle, but especially on a dual sport, I think they are one of the most important interfaces between you and the bike. Now, of course, everyone has their own individual riding style and preferences, which is why it's great that manufacturers of motorcycle handlebars offer them in a wide variety of bends. On the DR650 here, we've got a fairly low bar that has a lot of sweep to it, which is okay for cruising around on the road and some light gravel. But for somebody like me that likes to run single track and likes to ride, now, just about as fast as my ability will let me, these bars aren't really putting you in the right position to be an aggressive rider. And the stock bars on the XR650L here were the exact same way. Now I've got them swapped onto a set of Rox offset risers that not only bring the bars up, but they also kind of shove them further forward, which is really nice to give me a little bit more cockpit space. It also makes the bike a lot more comfortable to stand up on. The moto bend that I went with on here has much less sweep, meaning my arms aren't so close to me. I can kind of spread my shoulders out a bit, really get a good hold on the bike. Now, I'm not sure how high I'm really going to be able to go on the DR here. It seems like a lot of the cables and lines have plenty of play, except for the clutch cable. That one might be a little bit of an issue. And to be honest, without physically trying it, it can be really hard to know sometimes what exactly you'll be able to get away with. My favorite thing to do is usually just to find others on a forum or Facebook group that have done something similar to what you're planning on and just asking them or finding pictures to see how it worked. Now, to start out with on the DR, I'm going to try the Tusk Universal Big Bar Clamp Kit. So essentially this will give me about a 1-inch rise and will also convert from the sort of wimpy 7/8 diameter handlebars on the DR with this annoying cross brace for the much larger 1 1/8 inch diameter chub bar like I've got on the XR here. And I'm gonna do my best to try to install the ATV high bend bars on those, but if that doesn't work out, if the cables are just a little bit too short, I've got the KTM bend here instead, which is obviously a much lower bar. Now, when I traded my Gen 3 KLR for the DR here, it did already have these D-Flex handguards on here, but these are really for an MX bar, and the reason that I say that is essentially they have no drop here to sort of line up with the center portion of the bar where they clamp on at the center here. So that's why I went with these dual sport adventure guards. They've got a little bit more of a bend here to kind of match the bars, and they've got a bit more of a bend here as well. And you can actually order these in sort of a kit where everything will just sort of get selected for you. But this time around, I think there was one piece that was out of stock for the white and black, which was actually this piece, and instead I just requested them in black, ordered all of this stuff separate, and now I will just sort of piece it together. Whatever works best for you guys is, of course, the best way to do it. If you guys have any questions on this stuff, I'd be happy to answer them down in the comments. Now, I'm gonna hold off on these other two here until I can get a wiring harness made up for the bike that will be attached to a relay that'll just come on with the key, but I will eventually be installing this seat heater as well as the heated grips. I do have a couple videos where I've installed these on other bikes, so if you guys are interested in that, I can put a link for that down in the description. Otherwise, be looking forward to that video sometime probably in the fall. And of course, as always, huge thanks to my sponsor, Rocky Mountain ATV, for sending this stuff out to me to test for you guys. I could not make videos like this without them, and I could not make videos like this without my channel members. Huge thanks to you guys, and thanks to anyone who uses the affiliate links for the products that I use in my videos down in the description. All you have to do is click a link, make a purchase of anything, and it'll help support my content. Now let's get these bars installed. So much like most of the projects that I work on, I have run into a few snags that I want to go over with you guys. First of all, the KTM bend seems eerily similar to the stock bars, which really shouldn't be the case, and to be honest, the KTM bend wasn't the one that I wanted to go with. I'd actually wanted the Moto Bend bars that I've got on the XR here, but unfortunately those are pretty popular, so they're out of stock, and the ATV high bend bars I think seem like they should be, well, pretty decent as far as rise and bend goes. But when I'm seated in sort of the cradle portion of the seat, then the bars feel a little bit too close to me. Standing up, especially with a lowered set of pegs on here like I plan to do eventually, I mean, I think maybe they would be okay, but even with the little bit of rerouting that I did with the clutch cable, it still is going to have nowhere near enough slack to reach the clutch perch. And I do have these bars tilted relatively far forward. They're somewhere around the +1 mark, so that should give me as much forward rotation as I think I can probably stand. And still, there's just no way that this is going to happen. If I was to get a set of these Rox offset risers for the DR, it would certainly put the bars a little bit closer to the clutch cable and would also bring them up a little bit higher, which I think I would definitely like, especially sitting and probably standing too. The only thing is, big bar risers are about 30 bucks if you guys went to buy them, where if you went with the Rox offset risers, now those are more like 70. I'll pull these things off quick and show you guys what the other bars look like on here quick, and another issue that I ran into. Now obviously putting a tape measure on handlebars is something that has a lot of room for error, but when I laid these two down on the bench, it definitely seems like these don't have quite as much rise as I would think that they should in compared to the ATV high bend bars. Those are supposed to have a 4.75 inch rise, and these are really only supposed to be about 1 1/8 inches less than that, right around 3.62 inches. And it definitely seems like they're maybe more like 3.375 inches high, or somewhere around there to me. I guess maybe I'm wrong on that, but it doesn't really seem like it. Because the bars aren't coming up so high, it sort of puts me a little bit further forward, and they do feel all right there. But when I go to stand up, I don't know, they just feel a little bit too low. Honestly, I think maybe having these bars, or really the Moto Bend bars, on a set of offset risers that would get me a little bit more forward movement, I think might be just about right. I guess maybe I'm just gonna have to pick up a set of Rox risers for this one too. However though, even though the bars are relatively the same geometry as the stock ones, we are still 1 inch off of the stock bar location, meaning the bars sort of go up and back a bit. So as far as the clutch cable slack goes, it seems like that actually might be even a little bit tight. And you always want to check when the bars are locked all the way to the left. And yeah, that to me looks like that's going to be a little bit close. And there isn't really anything you can do until you get all the way back down here to the other end. So this is actually the clutch cable here that runs back behind the reservoir for the brake. And then that runs down here. And then this is what actuates your clutch. So if we follow that back up here, you can see that there's a zip tie, which I think should be a removable one. So I'm not just gonna reach up there and snip it. I'm gonna pull the tank off. I think there should be more than enough slack that we could pick up. That we should really have more than enough slack, even if I wanna go with the ATV high bends. And as for that other issue that I mentioned, these holes in the stock clamps are not through holes, meaning that they just end here. And the fasteners that are in this kit are just a little bit too long, and I've run into this before where I just shaved down the fasteners, well, just basically a little bit more than the distance between the top of the clamp and the bottom of the bar riser, which of course works, but they now sell this kit with a spacer, so I've requested a set of the spacers just so I can kind of test them out and show you guys what they look like. I think maybe while I'm waiting for those, I'll just order a set of the Rox offset risers, since to be honest, I think that's probably what I'll go with. It just seems like it should solve most of my issues. In the meantime though, we'll pull the seat and the tank off and see if we can't get a little bit more clutch cable slack. So with the tank removed, our clutch cable goes behind the shroud here, down the frame through a couple zip ties, and then down to its actuating point there. So I think all I'm gonna have to do is just pick the little tab up on this zip tie, sneak the clutch cable outside of it. If this is holding something on the opposite side, and then I believe I should just have got myself at least probably another inch. And as long as we keep this one in place for the tank clip to sort of sit on the little rubber damper here, we should be all right. That shouldn't get in the way. That got me a little more. I think we can do even a little bit better though. There's this hose that I've now got pinched here, so I wouldn't recommend leaving that way anyway. Pull this off the carb. There we go. Yeah, so that definitely got us a bit more real estate here. Oh yeah, that's looking much better. So this is now just on the opposite side of this little breather tube, which just runs up back to the, I guess not even to the airbox, just above the airbox. Now, especially with those ATV high bend bars, I would need a bit more slack for the throttle cables, and those are just tied up here, and I'm not really sure that I want to let those down, because then they're essentially just going to be resting right where my tank needs to sit on, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that. Yeah, I don't know that that really got me a whole lot, but I guess if we're looking for the most amount of slack, I'm thinking that that is about as good as we're going to get. Obviously, we've still got maybe a little bit taken out here. But of course, you want to make sure you're keeping your distance from this. That's where these guys sit on, and this is not a sharp edge, but certainly not something that I would want my throttle cables vibrating against. Although now that I'm looking at this, it seems like maybe we're kind of trapped by the clutch cable and the speedo cable. And I would think if we could get that on the opposite side, seems like there's a clear path through there. As long as we're not rubbing on any of this, I suppose we'll have to do that. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of how close this is going to be, but I don't really know that it'll be touching, and I guess maybe I can zip tie it somewhere once we get the bars in place, but it definitely seems like that gave me quite a bit more slack there. So even when I move the bars back and forth, it doesn't seem like these cables are going to be sliding back and forth at this point. They're basically held on by the clamp just on the other side of the shroud here. So there's probably not a whole lot of risk in the choke and both throttle cables sitting on this sort of sharp plastic edge, but I don't really like the thought of those vibrating around on there for the next however many thousand miles. So I think I'm just going to stick one more zip tie right here. There. Now if anything, the zip tie will sit on it. Well, it seems like that went pretty darn well. I've got more than enough slack here, even all the way over, and a good way to check that is to properly set the clutch slack length, meaning that you have about a nickel's worth of space between here, and then if you rotate the bars all the way this way and double check it, then you know you're not accidentally actuating your clutch while you're at full lock to the left. Throttle cables seem to have just about enough play. I think I could not rotate the bars any further back, and actually even where I'm at I think is just about as far as I could go So I think if I get some risers that will move these a bit farther forward, that should definitely kind of clean that up a little bit. But I do think that it would probably work just as is. Doesn't seem like there's any stress on the cables when I go to rotate the throttle. So as long as we would bench test that and there wouldn't be any issues with it idling up or anything like that, I would say that this should be just fine. Brake line looks just fine. Some of these cables, I guess specifically the ones that are zip tied right there. So I think it's this cable here is attached to the fairing stay down here. So I think best thing to do is just going to be to release these, pull those out, find a different place to zip tie them. I think the same thing will need to happen on this side, because this is a little bit on the short side, but again, this is just going to be tied up right there. So all I'll have to do is loosen that up, and then that cable should come up. Well, I gotta say, I am pretty surprised and pretty pleased that I was able to get that much slack out of everything. I mean, I really don't think that any of this stuff is gonna be an issue, even if I decide to move these a little bit further up and a little bit further forward, which I think is my plan. These $30 tusk risers, I think, are a great option, especially if you're building on a budget. However, I'm trying to build something that I'm going to be able to ride for a long period of time out on the road and with a decent amount of off-road mixed in there. So with my back issues, I want something that is going to be just a little bit further forward and maybe even a little bit higher up. So I'm going to see if I've got enough slack for that. And then I think I'm going to order a set of rocks risers that I've actually always sort of avoided because they just sort of seem like a bad idea to me, but just because it seems like a bad idea doesn't actually mean that it is or that it'll cause any problems. So I think I will test that out quick. We'll get some of those on order. I've got the set of these coming that will have the shims just so you guys can kind of see what they look like if you're interested in that. Again, links for all this stuff down in the description if you guys want to pick that stuff up. I would definitely appreciate if you guys use those because that's basically what allows me to make videos like this for you. And I think standing, these would probably work, but having them, again, a little bit further forward is just going to make me feel a bit more comfy. I'm sure not everyone is near as much of a perfectionist as I am, and honestly, I spend a lot more time looking at this stuff than I probably should. But the thing is, you want to make sure that everything is right here in the garage so you're not kicking yourself later. And I prefer to only do things once, and if you're going to try to do that, of course, you need to get it right the first time then. And even if it requires a bit of messing around here, I think it'll save me a lot of pain later down the road. So with the risers that I'm going with, I believe will be right about there, give or take, and there will be some adjustability with them, which is nice. And I believe, yeah, I think that should be just about 2 inches up and over, so seems like everything should be more than comfortable there. I will set these back in place. We will get the parts ordered, and in the meantime, we'll put some handguards on. Morning, guys. So thanks to Rocky Mountain ATV, again, we've got the spacers for the big bar clamps. While we're waiting for the rocks risers to show up, I'm going to put these on the bike and just take it out for a test ride. The new bars just look way too enticing, and I have been stuck sitting here in the garage staring at it for way too long. So let's get these put on, and we'll see how these new bars feel. So these aren't anything too fancy, they're just little aluminum washers that are the correct diameter and the correct thickness. And again, the issue that we're trying to fix here is the fact that with the fasteners bottomed out in here, the spacer itself doesn't sit tight to the clamp. So to test whether or not these are the right size, of course, we can just try and sneak this down into that gap there, and it is close, but it seems like there should be enough clamping power there. So we'll get these fasteners pulled out and stick these underneath the heads. Just as simple as that. I will definitely be pulling these back out and putting Loctite on them if I decide to go with them. I've had them in and out a few times, so the Loctite that they come with has worn off by now. And we certainly don't want these to loosen up while we're out on a ride. But until I decide on a set for sure, we'll just leave them as is. So of course it's a little bit hard to tell how much clamping power is really there, but obviously there's a heck of a lot more on this side now.
certainly feel aggressive and definitely give me, I think, the confidence and the correct positioning of my upper body that I was looking for. I'm kind of having a hard time deciding where exactly I want to be on the seat. I kind of had it in my head that I wanted to be right up on the tank, which in off-road situations you definitely want to be. I mean, I guess it might be kind of nice to have a little bit of extra arm bend when I'm up here, as opposed to having the bars a little bit further away. Kind of hard to say without trying it, obviously. I mean, I definitely feel a little cramped and like I've got plenty of room to extend my arms, but then if I'm just going to cruise, I pretty much want to be kind of back out of the trough. And there is, honestly, I mean, a fairly wide portion of the seat that I think they kind of intend you to sit on when you are just cruising. So I guess all that to say that maybe I shouldn't have been so quick to jump on the $80 or $90 rocks risers that I've still got coming. I think it'll still be worth a try. I'm actually kind of thinking maybe if they don't seem like an absolute necessity, or maybe if they raise the bars up a little bit too much for my liking, I could also stick the rocks risers that are on the XR on here and then put the new adjustable rocks risers on the XR to give me a little bit more bar lift. So I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do, but either way, I would say if you are, again, kind of building on a budget or don't want to spend more than twice as much on a set of risers, it seems like with this bend, with these risers, with them rotated forward, again, somewhere around the one notch being in the center, at my stature and 31-inch inseam, again, height 5'10", I would say this is pretty darn comfy, a heck of a lot more comfortable than I was with the sock bars on here. I probably should have tried to roll them forward a little bit, but I mean, I kind of ran into the same thing with the XR if you guys saw those videos. It's gonna help, and I think it is a worthwhile thing to try, but I know myself and the bikes well enough to know that this is really where I was gonna end up anyway, so that's why I kind of just didn't waste the time on it. I've also noticed, and maybe you guys noticed it too, that the right side of the stock bar was bent, and I believe the mount here, which you guys maybe even be able to see that on camera, this side of my bars is lower, so the mount underneath here will need to either get bent back or replaced. So that kind of throws things off a little bit, but I mean, it's just something that's going to happen on a dual sport.
So I think maybe it's just that I've got it in my head now and just can't quite let it go, but for some reason it just feels like these bars are maybe a little bit too high and still a little bit too close to me. So if I go with the risers that I've been waiting on, I think they're still going to be too high. They'll be further forward, but I mean, if they're too high now, they're definitely going to be too high then. I just kind of felt like on the gravel that it sort of made me, I don't know, a little bit less comfortable. And I've always said that the DR is much more comfortable on gravel and really even on pavement than the XR, just kind of due to its lower center of gravity. And I guess if I'm moving myself up, technically I'm raising the center of gravity. So I think I'm going to do a bit more swapping around, and then we'll take this thing out for another quick test ride.
What a gorgeous day for a ride. Cannot complain about having to come out here and test these twice, and I really have nothing to complain about with these KTM bend bars on the rocks offset risers that I borrowed off the XR 650L. It really seems like this is where I want to be, and I'm pretty surprised at myself that didn't go with the higher bars. I mean, usually I kind of try to go as high and far forward as I can, and maybe those bars would have felt a bit better on these risers, but again, these did pick the center portion of the bar up and shove it forward, and I really didn't want those ATV high bend bars any further up. it seems like on the road and the gravel, I'm just a little bit more comfortable with these, and that could be partially because they're just a little bit further forward. I really don't like bars set so far back from the fork tubes themselves. And with these risers, I guess hopefully you guys can see that from the correct perspective. They're basically right over the tubes, and that's just sort of what I like. I don't know, how much it actually affects things or if it's just in my head, but either way, I definitely feel better sitting on the bike. It just feels like it fits me better. It definitely feels like it gives you more control. Maybe just being a little bit lower, again, maybe being a little bit further forward. The bike just in general on all terrains just feels, whoops, that's neutral, just feels a bit, I don't know, more predictable and under control, I guess. And again, who knows, that could be in my head. And, if you're somebody that just needs that cockpit space and just, needs the bars a bit higher, I don't know that it's really going to be that big of an issue. I think just maybe my intuition just kind of told me that this is really, kind of the way to go. And standing up on the stock pegs, I would say these feel pretty good. It's not Tenere 700 territory or anything. The bars are still a little bit closer to the foot pegs than I would like, but I think if I swap these pegs out for some rear set ones and possibly some lowered ones, I think standing position will get better. However, this is totally fine for an actual attack position, which is, of course, what you want to be in when you're riding aggressively off-road. As far as sitting at riding aggressively, I would say I definitely can kind of sit up on the tank, and because these bars have a little bit less sweep to them, because I've kind of got them rolled forward, it really just feels good. I've got plenty of room for my arms. I don't feel like I'm kind of crunched up like I was before. I really like them. Would the Moto Bend be better? Yeah. I think I probably would swap them if I had another set laying around, and maybe I'll get a different set and try them on here someday. But honestly, I think, if the Moto Bends are out and the KTM bend seems like it would work for you, I don't think it's a bad option. One thing I will say, though, to save you guys a decent amount of cash and a lot of screwing around, because these KTM bend bars are fairly similar to the stock DR bars, really, you could buy these same risers and just leave the little inserts inside of them for the 7/8 bars, and all you would have to do is literally just unbolt your stock set, bolt the risers in place, and it would give you, oh yeah, so much better. It would give you more cockpit space, and, of course, you roll your bars a little bit further forward, so you get a lot more room, and, you don't have to mess with any of the stuff that you guys watched me doing today. So hopefully that will help somebody out. I personally just like the 1-in-1/8 fat bar. It's just kind of my thing. I like how they look. I like how they feel. It does seem like, and again, this could be in my head, but it does seem like these bars, the KTM bend, instead of the ATV high bend, picks up a little bit less vibration, which totally makes sense. The longer and the higher you have, your bars away from your center point where they're clamped, it's definitely going to change the harmonic frequency of them, and, that's going to directly affect how the vibrations come through the bars from the bike. So I would say these probably are my pick, and what I'll go with or stick with pretty close. Again, maybe the Moto Bend might be a little bit better just because it would get me a little bit higher. But honestly, I don't even know if it would be worth the hassle at this point. These feel good. So hopefully this video was helpful to you guys. If it was, let me know down in the comment section. Again, if you want to pick any of this stuff up, or just if you want to pick anything up, if you need an oil change or you're buying some gear, if you use the affiliate links down in the description or in the pinned comment, anything you buy after you click on those links will help me continue to make videos like this, and I definitely appreciate that. Huge thanks to you guys that use those links. Huge thanks to my members. I absolutely love riding motorcycles and making videos, and the fact that I can combine them and turn it into a career and help you guys is just mind-blowing. I am absolutely so blessed. I'm so thankful, and I hope you guys can get some good information and some good tips out of this, and I hope you can get your bike set up in a way that makes you happy and helps you get out and enjoy this beautiful world God created for us. So make sure you do that as soon as you can. The getting out and exploring and enjoying, not buying stuff. Do that later. Get out and go for a ride on your bike now. Thanks for watching. Take care, stay safe, and stay swanky. Running out of fuel. Oh, there we go. 100 miles to the tank before I hit reserve.